Bonacci.
And we have with us today a guest from far, far across the planet. Joining us today is Santos Bonacci. Santos Bonacci is a very fascinating and interesting person who's in high demand right now all around the world of alternative media. His website is universaltruthschool.com. He's got a very extensive YouTube channel called Mr. Astrotheology. We're going to be discussing the Hermetic founding of the United States of America, 1776 timeframe. Our founders absolutely avoided and wrote at length against democracy, theocracy, and monarchy. We also know that the vast majority of our founders, or at least a very large number of them, belong to so-called secret societies like Freemasonry. There is a lot of confusion about secret societies that sprung up following the medieval period of Europe known as the Enlightenment. It is also well known that Freemasonry was infiltrated by the Illuminati at literally about the exact time as our founding, of our country's founding. Many of us are confused about the real founding principles of the United States. Is the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution sort of a last stand for a number of men who pushed forward all that was good out of the Enlightenment, what was then secret societies that were required to stay alive? So what are the real founding principles of the United States? Why does the Washington Monument read, "A Mason and the first president of the United States"? Obviously, Masonry took priority over even being our first president. It is well known that the Illuminati infiltrated world Masonry about the same time that our founders put forth these powerful documents. We know the head of Freemasonry is monarchical in nature, hardly illuminated. Santos deals with reclaiming your dominion in the full sense of that word. He would like to see everybody become sovereign individuals and take their power back from the institutions, the governments, the legal, the religious authorities that have come to dominate our world as we know it. Santos seeks to empower others to claim their full dominion, and again, in the full sense of that word. He has several very interesting presentations free for viewing on the topic of what he calls the holy science, the science of as above, so below, which he sees as the ancient science based on the workings of the solar system. Santos has many new and fascinating projects in the works that are just about guaranteed to blow the lid off our current paradigms of law, science, and religion. Santos aims to empower everyone not only to claim their dominion, but to become the glorious sovereign individuals we are meant to be. It's time to speak truth to power, and let's get on with creating the world we want to live in, focusing our energies on the already changing paradigms in law, science, and religion. Again, our first hour, we're going to be discussing the Hermetic founding of the United States of America. The second hour, we'll be covering the holy science, which is based on the workings of the solar system. So, welcome to the program, Santos. What are your thoughts on the Hermetic founding of the United States of America?
Well, thank you very much. And we do have quite a bit of information about the founding fathers, and a lot of it is distorted. But certainly these men were illuminists, or they were hermetists, deists, and these people were fleeing from the religious authority of Europe. Or at least they were people who were opposed to the rulership, the so-called Christian rulership from Europe, you see. The Pilgrims who came over to America, they were followed by the Puritans. And the Pilgrims were mostly Hermetists. We get these very romantic little stories that they were Christians. But they were Hermetists, fleeing from the powers of Rome. And look, what I'm going to share with you today, I think you mentioned this, I didn't quite pick this up, Charlotte, but you did say that I'm going to spend the first hour dealing with the Hermetic origins of the United States of America. And then perhaps I can explain what it means to be Hermetic and who Hermes is, and what he actually taught, to see if that, to verify that it's true that our principles are Hermetic and not Christian, the constitutional principles. Now, I'm going to be reading quite a bit out of a book called The Book Your Church Doesn't Want You to Read. And the editor is Tim C. Leadham. And Jordan Maxwell has had quite a bit to do with this book. So, but on page 255, there's a chapter, Hermes versus the Puritans. And what I'm going to be talking about is Hermetic America, Puritan America, and defending our Hermetic heritage. How does that sound?
Sounds awesome.
That sounds absolutely wonderful. I mean, I would welcome anything read out of any book with a title like The Book Your Church Doesn't Want You to Read.
Yeah, look, this book is just absolutely exquisite. It has quite a few contributors, including Steve Allen, Dan Barker, Dr. Rocco Enrico, Dr. Robert Eisenman. Now, that's the guy who was a Dead Sea scholar, had a lot of interesting stuff to say, and Dr. Stephen Hoeler, and that's who I'm going to be reading from. He's written a book called The Alchemy of a Voluntary Society, and I'm going to be reading from that book. So I'll try and read nice and clearly and smoothly, and see if I can get as much possible read from this book in the next hour. So he starts by saying, the contemporary social arena of the United States is characterized by a cacophony of competing voices, all claiming to be the authentic, the true voice of this country. On the left of the socio-political spectrum, we hear many voices heavily coloured by late 19th and 20th century European thoughts. I'm referring here primarily to the dialectical materialism of Marx and Engels in its several variants, some amplified by Lenin. Marxist thought has become well-nigh normative for the American left. Okay? On the opposite end of the spectrum, we find a frequently confused melange of 19th century Protestant fundamental Christianity, liberally mixed with the economic outlook of the Industrial Revolution. As the left talks of concern for the disadvantaged and other human values, so the right dwells on tradition and family values, by which it means anything from the work ethic of the last century to sexual repression and the bashing of almost anyone who disagrees with these positions. Who or what, then, is the true American? So he's asking the question, what is true America? Who speaks for America? Does the land of the free, the home of the brave, the land of opportunity, the nation of the Statue of Liberty, have an authentic voice? Or is the cacophony of voices we hear the only voice of this land and this culture? In my view, there are three Americas. The first is ancient, or shamanic America, discussed in another chapter of my book. The second is Hermetic America, and the third is Puritan America, which in most respects has acted as the opposing force to Hermetic America. Now that's interesting, because people merge the two groups, the Puritans and the Pilgrims, together, whereas this man, Stephen Hoeler, is saying that there's a Hermetic America and there's a Puritan America. So he reads further saying, to gain an understanding of Hermetic America, we need to go back a considerable distance in history to the Alexandrian period of late antiquity. At this time, the Greek god Hermes, son of Zeus, messenger of the gods and patron of communications and commerce, became fused archetypally with the god form of the Egyptian god Thoth, lord of mind, scribe of the gods, and patron of transformation. The result was the splendid mystery system of Gnosis, closely related in spirit to the schools of Christian Gnosticism. A large and deeply inspiring body of mystical literature came into existence, all attributed poetically to Hermes Thoth, and designed to facilitate the spiritual insight, transformation, and ultimate liberation of the human soul. Now let me pause there for a moment, if I may, because I'm going to elaborate this on the second hour as to the nature of the Hermetic wisdom. Hermes is the mind principle in Egypt, and it relates to the planet Mercury. Mercury is the closest planet to the Sun. Therefore, Mercury receives the light of the Sun first, and the ancients knew that this was the mind principle, the intellect, and that's what Mercury rules, you see. So, in Egypt, this body of literature called the Corpus Hermeticum deals with the liberating of the human soul. It's a science. It's based on pure science, you see. And many schools were founded on Hermetic wisdom, but this wisdom was so precious and so wonderful and respected that it was not given to, at all levels, it was not given to everybody. And so certain people would have to prove their desire to want to have this knowledge and to put themselves through an initiation process whereby they can go through different levels of this knowledge and prove their respect and love and honour for this wisdom and their responsibility to be able to act in harmony with the different levels of knowledge that they were acquiring. You see, so we have this beautiful esoteric wisdom school in the West, and I'm going to trace this wisdom school and its all its teachers right up until our modern day, from Hermes of ancient Egypt, and I'm going to show the lineage of great teachers who have been the exponents of Hermetic wisdom. So let me continue on then, establishing this Hermetic origin of America. The Hermetic Renaissance was in full swing when Columbus came to America. It flourished in England at the time of Elizabeth I, and thus the immediate ethnic and cultural parent country of North America became thoroughly Hermeticized. At the very time when England was beginning her colonial expansion in the world. Thus, Hermetic and Neo-Hermetic currents were rapidly transplanted from England to America and were frequently reinforced by the emigration to the New World of European esoterists of a Hermetic orientation, such as German Rosicrucians from Central Europe, from Lord Francis Bacon, the Elizabethan scholar and Hermetic wise man, to Johannes Kepler, the German astronomer and wizard, and beyond. Esoteric influences, largely of Hermetic origin, were brought to bear on the newly founded colonies of North America. By the time of the American Revolution, the Hermetic Renaissance was fused to a considerable extent with the originally French movement of the Enlightenment. Thus, the normative leadership of the American Revolution, particularly its intellectual wing, led and exemplified by Benjamin Franklin, was thoroughly imbued with the spirit of the Hermetic Enlightenment. The founders of the American Republic proceeded to create a modern government, hitherto unheard of in history, a republic founded on the philosophy of Hermetic Enlightenment, and expounded on the philosophy, and expressing with certain modifications made necessary by the different historical era, the wisdom of the Corpus Hermeticum and other Hermetic books.
And I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to hold that thought because we have a break coming up here. Got to go pay the bills. We'll be right back with more with our fascinating guest here on Ron Paul Revolution Radio on American Freedom Radio.
Welcome to the world's meeting place. American.
It's practically narcotic.
Freedom.
Oh, yes, I like very much.
Radio.
You're an American institution.
American Freedom Radio.
Welcome back to Ron Paul Revolution Radio. I'm Rossi.
And I'm Brocky.
And warm welcome back to Santos Bonacci. I'd like to go ahead and plug your website. It's universaltruthschool.com. And for those of you in the listening audience, you can catch up with Santos on YouTube. He's got a very extensive YouTube channel. It's Mr. Astrotheology. And but today we're taking the first hour to explore the Hermetic founding of the United States of America. I mean, why is it that on the bust of Washington it says a Mason and the first president of the United States in that order? So you were reading from the book. Was it the one the church doesn't want you to read? The book your church doesn't want you to read, Santos?
Yes, exactly. The book your church doesn't want you to read, and I'm reading Stephen Hoeller. I hope I'm saying that correctly. It's spelled Hoeller. So I imagine that's spelled Hoeller.
Looks
Nevertheless,
good to me.
Yeah. Now, I just read the first portion of this little article. There's about 9 pages here. I'm going to skip to Hermetic America and just read a few excerpts there because I think we might run out of time. And people can purchase the book. It's a great book. There's many different little articles in there. It is an absolutely exquisite book, and I do recommend that everybody reads this book. The book your church does not want you to read. Now, I'm going to now read under the subheading of Hermetic America, and then I'm going to go to Puritan America and explain the difference, and then defending our Hermetic heritage. It's so important that America realizes and understands the true origin of the constitutional republic of the United States of America. Now, that's totally separate from the corporation, the democracy-based corporation, which is the United States, founded in the 1870s, and with its capital in Washington, D.C. So the constitutional republic of the United States of America, that's the constitution, that's the republic, that's the country, whereas the United States is a corporation, and Barack Obama is the president of that particular corporation. It's not the country. It's just the biggest corporation in the world. Whereas the true president of the United States of America, that would be Abraham Lincoln. He still is the true president of the United States of America. So Barack Obama is not the true president of the country. He's the president of the United States. So, I'm reading from the Hermetic America portion. It says, the first of the important principles brought into the fabric of the new Commonwealth from the Hermetic Enlightenment was the separation of church and state. This principle was unheard of in any part of the world or in any government at the time of the founding of the United States. Under the Constitution, no longer was there any established faith. By law, the government completely disengaged itself from the business of religion. The most that religious minorities could expect from other governments up to this time was tolerance. This meant that while maintaining an official established state religion, the authorities would nevertheless patiently endure the exercise of a different religion on the part of some. The prototype of tolerant monarchs was no doubt Frederick the Great, who uttered the famous words, "Let everyone be saved under his own fashion," but who still maintained the established Lutheran Church of Prussia. The founders of the American Republic clearly went beyond that. Popularly advanced theory accounting for the separation of church and state in America is that since there were several religions present and flourishing in the colonies, it was best to make religion a private matter and thus diffuse potential sectarian dissension. However, in view of the Hermetic influences that were brought to bear on the founders, it might be assumed that this was not the only reason for their attitude. The Hermetic Enlightenment was, as a whole, was not interested merely in the absence of religious strife. Rather, it felt that there was something profoundly wrong with the theologies of all existing religious denominations in the culture, and that for this reason none of them ought to be supported. The issue was not that one did not know which of the religions was right, but rather that one knew, or at least suspected, that all of them were wrong. One of the major disagreements between the Hermetic Enlightenment on the one hand and the various denominations of Christianity and Judaism on the other concerned the God concept. All denominations of Christendom at the time, as well as followers of Judaism, were adherents of theism, a belief in a personal God, creator, maintainer, and judge of the world, who is personally involved in the management of creation at every moment of time. In the eyes of the Hermetic thinkers of the Enlightenment, this concept had shown itself to have not only theoretical flaws, but also to be responsible for certain practical ills, such as the divine right of rulers, the presence of religious law within the fabric of society, and many more. If God was actively involved in the affairs of the world and of humans, it was easy to envision that this same God instituted the existing governmental and social structure, and that the state ought to enforce God's ordinances in order to please him. By their separation of church and state, we can infer that the founders of the United States were not in favor of such a God. The men and women of the Enlightenment were usually not theists, but deists. Deists accepted a supreme being as the ultimate origin and the final destiny of all beings of the universe. But they were convinced that this Godhead did not actively manage the universe or affairs, or interfere with the affairs of mankind. Theirs was the alien God of the Hermeticists, the Gnostics, also known at times as Deus absconditus, the God who has gone away. So you see, there's a very, very big difference with the thinking of the theists, the theocratic Christian and Calvinist Puritans, who believe that God is taking a very, very active part in this social makeup of the world. Therefore, they have the right to maintain this theocratic God's wishes on this planet and meddle in the affairs of one and all. Whereas the Hermetists were teaching that God, the supreme God, whilst we all are bound and destined to return to that cause, that God, the deist, Deus, he does not interfere in the affairs of mankind. So it's quite an interesting juxtaposition of philosophies that came to America. But the founders were clearly Hermetists. Another important consideration is the source of the legitimacy of government. In the prevailing arrangement in Europe at the time, it was understood that the source of legitimacy was the will and grace of God. However, the founders of American government decided that the will of the people, or the just consent of the government, made a government legitimate. Here we find the Hermetic principles powerfully at work again. Ever since Alexandrian Egypt, Hermetic teachings have always given prominence to the godlike power and dignity of the human soul. The human soul is not a mere creation of God, but rather is divine in origin and in its essential nature, and as such cannot be forever subjected to external authority. The human was constituted as someone who causes events to occur and not as someone who is the passive recipient of the effects of an external divine will. As free agents, citizens may contract with each other to form associations such as state and nation, and are not destined to remain subjects of rulers who are foisted on them. The social contract theory of Montesquieu also served as one of the inspirations of this feature of American government. Are you finding this very interesting?
Well, extremely. I note that, for example, Christopher Hitchens, someone even more extreme than I am, has said that he, and an extreme proponent of liberty as well, has said that he can get along with the deist, whereas not with the theist. I share the same view.
Yes.
And I've written down so far Hermetica Enlightenment. Number 1, separation of church and state. And second was the just consent of the governed, not the will or grace of God. These are huge philosophical differences.
There's a big difference. One is freedom and one is slavery. And I've proven this in my videos. I've prepared a lot of well-researched videos where I have proven beyond all doubt that there are two systems. The theocratic system where they teach, the theist system where they teach that God intervenes, is an interventionalist. He's a God who takes a very, very active part in this world, and he does that through his appointed, faithful and discreet slave, these governing bodies, self-appointed men, basically, who run all the 30,000 Christian denominations on this planet. The governing body of the Jehovah's Witnesses, they have their particular brand of Christianity and mind control. The governing bodies of the Baptists, the governing bodies of the Mormons, they are all different. They all have their own peculiar, patented, if you like, brand of Christianity where they interpret the scriptures, and all the people that belong to that church are believing that they are the only ones saved. It's elitism and slavery and mind control at its best. You see, the principles of Christianity come from Hermeticism. And I'm going to prove this in the second hour. I'm going to give enough evidence to prove that we have an ancient and wonderful Prisca Theologia, an ancient theology that was given to us and bequeathed to us by a very, very kind and well-informed priesthood that gave us this theology, which was based on science, pure science. And it's the science of the liberation of the soul and the spirit from physical incarnation. And that's all it is. It's our religion. And it's in there, it's hiding in the Bible, but it's been misinterpreted and misrepresented by church goers. And this is deliberate, because if they can do this, the powers that be, the elite, through their instruments, their controlling instruments, the religions of the world, they can control mankind. You know, they can have a voter base. They can have 51% voter base that will put their hands up and vote for George Bush, if you like. Because they get controlled and manipulated from their pulpits, these people. Now, let's discuss that was what I've discussed thus far is Hermetic America, and I haven't read all of this, so I've just read little snippets. I'm now going to the subheading Puritan America before I go to the final subheading, which is defending our Hermetic origin. Now, what's Puritan America? Well, it reads, in contrast to the Hermetic spirit, however, is another element in American life, which from the very beginning was different from, and indeed antagonistic toward the Hermetic Enlightenment. This opposing idea was Puritanism, or the Calvinist Protestant form of Christianity. In many ways, Puritanism became an entire lifestyle, a powerful force influencing public life throughout American history. The Puritans were transplanted from England following in the footsteps of John Calvin, the theocratic tyrant of Geneva, who was known to put people in prison for such crimes as dancing. You see what I was talking about before about freedom and enslavement? You see these Puritan Christian churchgoer types who are happy to kill you if you dance. John Calvin was a killer. He killed Michael Servetus. Michael Servetus was basically a Christian / Gnostic / Hermetist. And he was murdered by John Calvin. John Calvin made sure that he was processed through the Inquisition because he was not conforming to Christian thinking.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to interrupt you there. I was going to say, by the way, that I wouldn't describe Puritanism as a lifestyle, but rather a death style. Anyway, we have a break coming up. Please hold on to that thought. The founding of Puritan America, which we'll continue with after the break, here on Ron Paul Revolution Radio on American Freedom Radio.
Welcome back to Ron Paul Revolution Radio. I'm Rossi.
And I'm Brocky.
And I just wanted to clarify for the listening audience that Rossi and Brocky are 100% grassroots. We are not associated with RevPAC or Ron Paul's official campaign in any way. We are just people of the grassroots volunteering our time to further the cause of a great defender of the constitutional republic, Ron Paul. And I'd like to welcome back Santos Bonacci. Santos, before we move on into the Puritans, when I'm out there in the world of internet and videos and blogs, a lot of times people are repulsed by Ron Paul's willingness to withdraw funding or U.S. aid to Israel. And I frequently say, well, Israel has a supremacy doctrine. They are God's chosen, and it stands in stark contrast to our Declaration of Independence that says that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with unalienable rights, which couldn't be more the opposite of a supremacy doctrine. And so I don't see what we have so much in common with Israel as a lot of people seem to do. Would you like, before you move on to the Puritans, would you like to do a shout out for Ron Paul and tell us what you feel about Ron Paul?
Yeah, look, he has the spirit of the founding fathers in him. He knows and understands what a constitutional republic really means as opposed to democracy and the corporation, the fascist oligarchic corporation that has overtaken America. Unfortunately, the land that was free. I should mention here, by the way, that our guest is being 100% accurate. The word fascism is defined as corporations in close cooperation with government. That was how our dear Italian dictator Benito Mussolini got the trains to run on time. He jumped in bed with the corporations. That's a very bad form of government. Yeah, it's fascism. It's out and out fascism. And if you need proof of that, just have a look at the I think it's your Congress. You'll see the fasci of Rome, the two massive big fasci of Rome sitting there in your is it the Senate or the Congress? I'm not sure how your government works there, but you'll see when the speakers get up to speak, you'll see behind them and by the side of the American military flag, you will see the fasci. That's telling you.
It was also on the back of our 10-cent piece here for almost a century.
Yeah, well, in Latin. Sorry.
I was just going to say that corresponds with the corporate takeover around 1870s, like we were discussing.
Exactly. You see, so it's a counterfeit. It has been laid in juxtaposition to this republic. And Benjamin Franklin did say, we give you a republic if you can hang on to it. Well, Rome, he knew what he was saying. He knew that he was saying, you won't be able to hang on to it because Rome's a coming. The Calvinists and the Puritans and the theocratic types, the theists, the people who want to subject you to their God, their fictional creation that they have made, their Humpty Dumpty God in the sky that they've created, their personal saviour, this interventionalist who comes in and, whoops, I'm going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, I'm going to bring about a flood, I'm going to bring Armageddon. This creation, this is an absolute fiction, and I've proven this. But as you use the word there, Charlotte, used the word supremacist. Well, they're elitists. These churches are elitists. I was Jehovah's Witness for 22 years, and I was condemning the Mormons and the and the Baptists and the Pentecostals and everybody else. I was in the elite group that was going to survive Armageddon, and I was going to watch the destruction of people like yourselves, guys, because you do not follow my faith. If
I can point out, even on a series that the BBC did recently that was ostensibly on freedom of religion, they had time for a statement by leaders of various faiths in the United Kingdom, and the very first speaker, who I will not name for fear of embarrassing them, finished his speech with, I shouldn't really have been first. After all of my colleagues worship God in their way. I merely worship him in his way. Now talk about that for arrogance.
Wow.
My God, this is absolute buffoonery. These are people who do not know any of the science, the beautiful science that is in the Holy Scriptures. You see, what happens with these clowns, the priests and the clergy class, is they actually destroy spirituality in people. You see, what they do is they give you religion. Relegare in Latin, relegare means to bind with fasci, and that is the fasci of their god. They
even in English, religion means absolute belief without proof. It's the without proof part that bothers me.
Exactly. This is absolute mind control. It's brainwashing and mind control.
But let's stay focused. Let's go back to the Puritans, shall we? And we will certainly open up that conversation wide open with the Holy Science on the second hour.
Yes, beautiful. Look, I've got a couple more choice snippets from the subheading Puritan America, and then we go to defending our Hermetic origin. Okay, so reading on from there, where we spoke about John Calvin being a killer, which he was. So he had some people thrown in prison for crimes such as dancing. Inspired by Calvin's disciple, John Knox, the ranting scourge of Scotland, English Puritans had become the cause of much anguish in their home country. Some of them came to America in 1630, close on the heels of the Pilgrims, who were not Puritans, and who had arrived in 1620. Let's clear this part of the American history once and for all. Oliver Cromwell, whose associates cruelly executed King Charles I, instituted a pious dictatorship in which Christmas was outlawed and merry old England was stripped of virtually all colour and beauty. This cruel and boring regime was eventually replaced by the restored monarchy of the House of Stuart, and Cromwell's Puritan friends were increasingly subjected to the ire of just about everybody. Many of them decided to sail over the Atlantic to join their fellows in Massachusetts and to kill a whole bunch of indigenous Indians and persecute a whole bunch of Hermetists who were fleeing to the land of freedom.
If you'll forgive me, my friend, I have to mention something here. In 1969, I moved from sunny, modern, rational Southern California to a town called Marblehead, Massachusetts. And it's interesting to note that our town was purely Pilgrim in its foundings. We were founded in 1629, 1 year before the Puritans got there. And the difference in our town charter and what we did is night and day. I tell you from personal experience, just for example, and here's a very telling one, of all the treaties that were signed between the indigenous North American peoples, the Indians as they were called at that time, and the white man, there is exactly one signed prior to 1920 or something, that is still in force and has never been broken by either side. One treaty. And that treaty was signed between the town of Marblehead and the local indigenous residents, guaranteeing them a portion of Marblehead Neck, a peninsula of the town, for their summer religious festivals. That treaty is still in force today, and that area is still being used for such festivals. The only unbroken treaty ever. And that was done by the Pilgrims, not the Puritans.
Yeah, lovely. Well said. Yeah, there's a lot of evidence to support all this. There's no doubt about that. People get confused because there's a lot of indoctrination in our education system, especially in the last 50 years. And especially since the Federal Reserve and the Vatican has run the country. They make sure that people's minds are poisoned and confused about the true history of America. The Hermetists did not kill a soul. They would never kill a soul. They are enlightened human beings. The killers were the supremacists, the elitists who had to chop off the heads of unbelievers, and that they did. That they did. America is a land that has been filled with much shed blood from these corporate Christian churches.
I don't mean to steer us off course, but I've made an observation with the judicial system and a number of innocent people that are in prison, and the way it's almost like an inquisition, because a prosecuting attorney has what's called prosecutorial immunity. So let's say a wrongful, evil prosecutor knowingly puts an innocent person in jail. There's no recourse. There's no redress. And that's tantamount to the Inquisition in our own legal system today.
Yeah, it is the Inquisition. It's absolutely right. We only have a little bit more before the break, but those observations. I should mention that Ron Paul has changed exactly one position in all of his years in public life. He's changed one, just one. And that single position was that he would support the death penalty back in the 1970s, but he's thoroughly backed away from that position now, and there's a reason. Because in between whiles, he discovered how many innocent people were sitting on death row and in prison. When DNA evidence became available, what was it, 76% of the inmates on New York's death row were proved innocent? I mean, what kind of a system is that? Anyway, we do have a break coming up, so we'll be right back with more of our fascinating guest here on Ron Paul Revolution Radio on American Freedom Radio.
Welcome back to Ron Paul Revolution Radio. I'm Rossi.
And I'm Brocky.
And a warm welcome back to Santos Bonacci. I'd like to give out your website, sir. It's universaltruthschool.com. Ladies and gentlemen, catch him at YouTube at username Mr. Astrotheology. Brocky, do you have something to say quickly?
Well, my wife was also on me to finish the justification. When they found that 75 or 76% or whatever it was of those death row inmates were innocent, those people were the only ones for whom DNA evidence was available. So, I mean, they could have all been innocent. It doesn't, that's a really telling thing when the only ones you can test are all innocent. That's a horrible indictment of our judicial system. And she also mentioned something else that we should mention to all the listening audience. You, as a member of a jury, have the power to acquit no matter what the law says. And that power is inherent in our republic and, in fact, in all the nations ruled by common law, which includes Australia. And those are shining moments when you acquit in spite of the law.
And thank you, Santos Bonacci, for joining us. It's very early in the morning for you, so thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Okay.
Well, just I would just like to sum up then what I was talking about with Puritan America. So we see there this situation where the Puritans have got a massive, strong foothold in the country. And look, I'm going to leave off from reading the beautiful, choice little snippets there, and I can probably include them in a subsequent interview. But under the heading of defending our Hermetic heritage, it reads, "Will the Hermetic vision prevail, or will the encroachments of an archaic, unconscious religiosity and of a gravely flawed worldview and lifestyle based on them drive the American people and culture farther and farther away from the goals envisaged by the founders of this nation? Finally, we need to take our stand and begin vigilantly to sift the Hermetic wheat from the Puritan chaff in contemporary public life." So let me just leave that at that, and I urge people to have a look at that book, the book that your church doesn't want you to read. We see there that the founding fathers were Hermetists. They were deists. They understood that there was a creator, a cause, a wonderful originator, a prime source for all of the physical, visible things that appear to our eyes. They realized that these material things came from spiritual causes and not the other way around. You see, the materialist, the material scientist, he sees things from a purely material perspective, and that is that we are pure physical, cellular, molecular, evolved bodies, which then developed side effects as thinking and heart and emotions and all of these other things, whereas the Hermetists taught that it was the other way around. Our origin is from above. Our origin is actually spiritual. But you see, what the churches do is they destroy this spirituality. Now, and they give you religion, relegare, to tie you up in Latin. Now, what is Hermeticism? Well, it is the teaching of the soul, of the science of as above, so below. What an ancient priesthood in Egypt understood through their studies and through the higher consciousness that they enjoyed because of the cyclical nature of our solar system. You see, we live in a cycle called precession of the equinoxes. And this forms a major part of the science of as above, so below. And what happens is our consciousness goes up and down, up and down. And we go through certain ages, and they are contrasted by the elements of gold, silver, bronze, and iron. When we are in the golden age, we enjoy ethereal consciousness. We are fully conscious. We have all of our 360 senses activated, and we have all our psychic powers and all of our spiritual powers. We are very, very powerful divine creatures, and we've enjoyed these powers on this earth. And the results and the evidence of this is the beautiful megalithic monuments that have been left to us by these wise and wonderful conscious beings that were on this earth thousands of years ago. The Great Pyramid is a great evidence of this. We could never reproduce that, even with all the technology that we have today. So we know that consciousness goes up and down, pretty much like we have day and night. During the day, we are fully conscious. We can see everything. We can see all the objects, and we walk around and we indulge in conscious external activity. Whereas when we go to sleep at night, we go subconscious or unconscious. And you see, this is what's happening in the 24,000 year cycle of precession. We awaken, we go to sleep. Spiritually, we awaken, we go to sleep. The same thing happens with summer and winter. The earth awakens with fruits and flowers and vegetables and all sorts of wonderful food to sustain mankind by virtue and grace of the power of the electric sun. But when that sun seems to fade and wither and decline and recede in the winter months, there appears to be a death that visits the land. If you don't have stored food in your pantries, you could potentially not survive the winter. And the sun appears to leave us and abandon us to the cold, merciless season of winter in which most people die, especially elderly and sick people. So we have these three cycles, day and night, and the ancients were afraid of the night because most tragedy befell humans at night. Dangerous animals would come out of the forest and prey on helpless victims at night. Winter is the same. The snow, the merciless snow, has killed many, many, many people. And the same is happening with the unconscious situation that we find ourselves in. The ancients were kind enough to leave hieroglyphs and messages and symbols on their monuments in Egypt, which deal purely and solely on the holy science. All those hieroglyphs, by the way, hieroglyphs means holy writing, they are all there to survive the ravages of time, so that one day when returning conscious mankind would come back to their senses and receive the lost consciousness that they had in the Golden Age, they would be able to read these symbols on the monuments and they would be able to return to their most holy and wonderful religion/science. And this is what my work is all about. What I'm doing is I'm sharing with the world the Prisca Theologia. Now, what's the Prisca Theologia? Prisca means ancient and Theologia means theology. Now, it does have the word theos in it, but please don't run away. Please don't run away and think that it has anything to do with theocracy and the theist understanding of a interventionalist God. This is pure fiction, and it's a Judeo-Christian matrix which is designed to enslave mankind. Okay? And the elites do that because they think they're doing mankind a favor, because mankind are just a bunch of goy, a bunch of chattel, a bunch of cattle, dumb, stupid plebeians, proletariat, ignoramus masses, and they need to be deceived and controlled. Therefore, they get it. They get mind control, and they get it good and hard in their churches. Whereas the Hermetist mystical way is the way of freedom. And it's the way of respecting and perceiving the divine and living in harmony with the laws of the divine, not the commandments of the divine or of the God. You see, what these wonderful priesthoods understood was that what happens above is exactly what happens in the microcosm below. When you look at the stars above, you are staring at the atoms in the body of the God, the material God of the universe. The material star systems, they are the physical part of what we call God. In fact, Manly P. Hall teaches that astronomy and astrology of the God. So when you look up, this is what you see. You see, first and foremostly, the 12 signs of the zodiac. And they are the signs in which the sun always travels. You see, the sun is always in the zodiacal belt of 16 or 17 degrees width. And that belt runs from the east to the west. So the sun is always in one of the signs of the zodiac. In fact, right now, it's in the sign of Scorpio. It is the 29th of October, and we are in the first decan of Scorpio. But what the ancients understood is that when you look up to the east on the 21st of March, you have the equinox, in which the sun splits the day between 12 hours of darkness and 12 hours of light. There are only 2 equinoxes during the year. This will happen on March the 21st and September the 21st. And what this is, this particular holy day is so beautiful because it balances the forces of light and the forces of darkness for 2 days during the year. And what it gives us is this. When you look to the horizon at 6 o'clock, the sun will be breaking the dawn on that particular day. At 6 p.m., it will set perfectly. It will only happen, rise at 6 and set at 6 perfectly on that one day, or on the September the 21st. It's opposite, 6 months later. And what it's giving you is a story in the sky. When you look to the first 30 degrees above the horizon, those stars there belong to the sign of Aries, the ram, the Lamb of God. The next 30 degrees portion of the sky belongs to Taurus, the next to Gemini, and there you have the first quadrant, from the horizon of the sunset to directly above your head, midday. There's the first 90 degree slice of the pie, which is ruled by the spring months of March, April, and May, and the 3 zodiacal signs of Aries, Taurus, and Gemini. Then begin Cancer, Leo, and Virgo, and that brings you to the sunset. Those 6 signs are the signs of light. They sit above the horizon. They correspond to the light, the day portion of the day. The signs below the horizon are these: Libra, Scorpio, and Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces, all in order. Now, the ancients knew that in the microcosm, in the human body, we have the same format. Aries is in the head. The top of your head begins at March the 21st, the equinox. And that is the top of the head, the brain, is ruled by Aries. The bottom of the head is ruled by Taurus, the mouth and the neck. Then Gemini, the twins, rule the 2 arms, the twins, and the 2 lungs. That's the first quadrant. That's the spring part of the body. Then Cancer is the chest, Leo is the heart, Virgo is the belly. That's the top part of the body. That corresponds to the signs that are above the horizon. Then below the horizon is Libra, which corresponds to the kidneys. The 2 kidneys are the 2 scales of Libra. Then Scorpio is the generative area of the body. Sagittarius is the thighs. Capricorn is the knees and the skeletal part of the body, which Capricorn rules. Aquarius is the shins and the blood circulation. Pisces, the 2 fish, are the 2 feet. The ancients knew that we have a perfect cause and effect correspondence. And this is one of the Hermetic principles of the 7 principles of Hermes, which is the principle of correspondence, which is the correspondence of as above, so below. This is the greatest of all the Hermetic teachings, as above, so below. So what happens is this beautiful as a science, and as I said, this corresponds with the day and the year. You see, where the sun rises at 6 a.m., Aries, the sign of the Lamb, this also corresponds to March the 21st. So 6 a.m. is pinned to March the 21st. These two cycles. So you see that summer begins, or spring and summer begins at March the 21st, and as the sun goes up to the Tropic of Cancer on June the 21st, you have the longest day. So you can understand that this is the beautiful light photosynthesis portion of the year. Spring and summer are the signs that return and rejuvenate the earth with vitality and life and fruits and abundance. And I'll leave it at there. We'll take a break. I can hear the music coming, and then we'll go on and see how this law of correspondence has to do with our lives, our personal lives.
You're absolutely right. We'll be right back with more of our fascinating guests, Santos Bonacci on Ron Paul Revolution Radio here on American Freedom Radio.
Welcome back to Ron Paul Revolution Radio. I'm Rossi.
And I'm Brocky.
And a warm welcome back to Santos Bonacci. And he was explaining the what he calls the holy science, the science of the solar system. We were talking off air a little bit about the concept of the precession and how the constellations have shifted over the thousands of years. Would you like to address that a little bit as we go forward, Santos, please?
Yes. Now, one of the main reasons why astrology is attacked and poo-pooed by the religionists and the academic world, they treat it as a pseudo-science, you see, and the religions write it off as from the devil. It cannot benefit mankind. It is from the devil. Well, one of the reasons they say this is they refer to the fact that the constellations have actually slipped out of their places. For instance, you see, the sun is not rising in the sign of Aries as it has been for 2,000 years prior to the age of Pisces. It is now rising in the age of Pisces at the equinox, you see. So on March the 21st, instead of having Aries, the sun in Aries, the sun is now in Pisces. It's 30 degrees removed. It has slipped out of position. So people saying, well, you know, if you're born on March the 26th, for instance, you are no longer an Arian, you are Piscean. Well, no, you are still an Arian, and you still have the traits of an Arian. You still have the fire sign traits. You still are born under that particular sign, because as I have explained on one of my videos, I've explained this thoroughly so that people can understand why astrology is not to be discredited because of the slippage of precession. And in order to understand this, one should read the works of Thomas H. Burgoyne. Thomas H. Burgoyne, and in particular the books The Light of Egypt, The Science of the Soul and the Stars, Volume 1 and Volume 2, and also another book which is called Celestial Dynamics. In there, Thomas Burgoyne explains that it's the angle of the rays of the sun which cause the effects on this earth. It's the solar system. It is solar-centered, solar system-centered science. It has nothing to do with the stars' position in the skies. So rather than focusing on the fact that they have slipped and therefore the science is skew-if, we can understand that it's all based on the angles of the solar system. So in other words, on March the 21st, the sun will always be considered to be in Aries. It will never be Pisces. It will never be. Because when the sun breaks that point of balance on the 21st of March every year, where it splits the day between 12 hours of darkness and 12 hours of light, That is the beginning of a cycle. And that cycle must begin with cardinal fire in Aries. It cannot begin with mutable water in Pisces. And it must begin in the head of the human being. See, every day, fractally, we are being charged with electromagnetic radiant vibrations. And they always begin in the head, in Aries, in the electromagnetic computer, which is the brain. So I can get back to that anyway and elaborate on that, but I'm going to do another presentation next month on the 6th of November, and I'm going to elaborate on this so that we can get it right, because a lot of people get a lot of confusion about this.
Right. Can I ask you this? It would seem to me that also the stories of the Bible correspond to the cycle as well, and so the sequence is the beginning of the cycle. It's going to cycle through the whole process and end up back at that time when the sun does rise in Aries. But that's like the foundation stone. It's the cornerstone of the whole system of being able to describe the larger system. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah. Astrology is the metaphysical part of the science of the stars, which enables one to attune himself with his mystical nature. That's what it is. Whereas astrotheology, which we'll deal with right now, because you've touched on that, the stories in the Bible and everything like that, and all the characters. Astrotheology, which is what I deal with, is the mythological part, the storytelling part, which gives us many layers of spiritual wisdom. It gives us eschatology, which is the science of the end of the cycle and how to interpret the cycles and how to live best within those cycles. You see, if you understand the cycle of day and night, you understand that you can get all your work done during the day so you can see, and then at night you can do all your resting. Summer and winter, you go about collecting your fruits and your nuts and your berries and your vegetables, and you preserve some for the winter. So you do not get consumed or destroyed by the cycles. You live with those cycles, you see. So what the Bible does is it gives you all the characters of the solar system in allegorical form, and it tells you these beautiful stories about how they deliver to you certain cycles by which you will benefit if you master those cycles. Now, this is how it works, okay? I've already established for you the equinox, how the equinox sits on the horizon at March the 21st and September the 21st. The solstices, if you draw a circle in front on a piece of paper in front of your eyes, and you draw horizontally a line dissecting the two hemispheres, you will have the equator. And on that rests the equinoxes. Now, if you draw a line vertically directly down the center, that line represents the solstices, and you have a 24-hour clock. So on the left, you will have the equinox of March the 21st. And on the top at 12 o'clock, you have the solstice of June the 21st. Okay, so you go around this circle, and you have the circle that the sun makes every day. Now, what's happening in the Bible is this. You have these characters who are performing 12 labors, or they have 12 disciples, or they have 12 sons. In Revelation, you hear Jesus talking about the 12 pillars in the temple of my God. You hear about the 12 trees that are in the Garden of Eden, or in the Garden of the Kingdom of God on earth. And you hear of all of these stories that incorporate the number 12. Well, what they're telling you in cryptic form, in allegorical form, is they're telling you stories about the sun, and how the sun conquers the darkness, and how the sun conquers the winter months. For instance, the Gospels of Matthew and Luke, they begin with a nativity scene where the Son, S-U-N, is a child, a baby in a manger. Well, let's see how this story corresponds with the story above and the story of the 12 signs of the zodiac. When the sun is a child, it's the 25th of December. So the sun begins its journey to climb up the mountain and to wax its light potential. Like the moon, it waxes and wanes. So the sun has a waxing cycle which goes from December to June. From December the 25th to June, you could say the 21st, the solstice. So the sun is climbing up and climbing up and climbing up. Once it reaches the solstice, then it reaches the sign of Cancer, and the crab begins to walk sideways, so the sun begins to do what's called a sideways walk, and it begins to wane. It begins to fall and go all the way down from the beautiful summer heights down to winter again, the 21st of December, to die. So in the nativity scenes of Matthew and Luke, they begin the yearly cycle of the sun in the cold months of December at the solstice. Whereas the Gospels of Mark and John, they omit the nativity scene and they begin with Jesus at the age of 30. All of a sudden, Mark chapter 1 jumps out and Jesus is a full-grown man. There's no nativity, and he begins his ministry. Well, that's the sun beginning its cycle at the equinox rather than the solstice. So you have two Gospels, Matthew and Luke, which begin with the solstice part of the cycle, and you have Mark and John, which begin at the equinox part of the cycle. So what you see then is that as the ancients taught that the sun, as it grew from 25th of December, it took 30 days to reach the sign of Aquarius. So at 30 years of age, or 30 degrees of travel, the sun enters a new sign, and the sun is baptized by that sign. It's January, and January is Janus. Janus is John. John the baptizer is Aquarius. He holds he is the water bearer. He carries a flask of water and he is pouring the water down. This, in the natural cycle of the sun, corresponds to the wet season in the northern hemisphere. The sun is getting a hell of a baptism as it goes through the month of baptism. In fact, that's what it used to be called, January in the Latin calendar. It used to be called baptismo. So you see that the sun gets baptized by John the Baptist. Then the sun is purified in the month of February. In fact, the word febru in Latin means to purify. And in fact, the 1st of February is the day of the purification of the Virgin Mother of Jesus Christ. And because this is the month where the sun is growing in its light force, and the days are lengthening. So in February, the festival or the season of Lent begins. There's 40 days of Lent. Lent is a word which is short for lengthen. And this is because the days are lengthening, but still the sun has not conquered. The sun must conquer once it reaches the 21st of March, you see. And until such time, it is in the wilderness. This is why Jesus, immediately after being baptized, goes into the wilderness for 40 days. This corresponds to the 40 days of Lent, in which Christians down below are eating fish, because February is Pisces. And Pisces is the season of fish and the fishing season. Therefore, Christians are admonished to eat fish because the Lord Jesus Christ in the heavens, the sun, is in the sign of the fish. So already in just one quadrant, we see much of the gospel story unfolding. You see the baptism, you see the eating of the fish and the lengthening of the days, the season of Lent and the 40 days of wilderness, that Jesus is in the wilderness. Then, of course, Jesus returns from the wilderness and begins his ministry. And the first thing that happens is Jesus is declared as the Lamb of God that takes away the sin of the world. And John the Baptist declares this because the sun now has entered into the sign of Aries. And, of course, as I said, when the sun enters the sign of Aries, this is the sign of forgiveness, because now the days are longer and the nights are shorter. So the Lamb of God, which introduces the longer days every year, has been given the designation as the Lamb of God that takes away the sin of the world. Because the sin of the world is the 6 months of winter in which the sun was suffering. Its rays were afflicted. They were afflicted and short, and therefore mankind suffered. But now the return is in the sign of Aries, therefore the Lamb of the God that takes away the sin of the world.
And you provide me with a perfect breaking point. We do have a break coming up, but we'll be back with more of our fascinating guest here on Ron Paul Revolution Radio on American Freedom Radio.
Welcome back, Ron Paul Revolution Radio. I'm Rossi.
And I'm Brocky.
And a warm welcome back to Santos Bonacci. I'd like to plug your website. And ladies and gentlemen, we are just barely scraping the tip of the iceberg of Santos Bonacci's work. It's a must-do. Go to Mr. Astrotheology on YouTube and see hours upon hours of in-depth discussion concerning the science of so as above, so as below, the ancient science of the workings of the solar system. There, you will be profoundly amazed at the revelations that Santos brings forward. And I was completely ecstatic to find, Santos, that your universaltruthschool.com, you've changed the website. It's fabulous. So congratulations on your new website.
Thank you.
And also that you brought to clarity of my mind, because I knew that the religion, so to speak, was a part of the tyranny. And it seems that you brought to my clarity of my attention that what tyranny has sprung from making a literalization out of the SUN. And what are your comments about literalizing the sun?
Yeah,
Christ.
look, yeah. This is the great crime committed by the churchgoers. The churchgoers have misunderstood the scriptures. Simple as that. They've misunderstood them. They do not understand them. We need to reclaim the Bible for Hermes, because it is Hermes. It's a product of Hermetic mind. There is nothing in it that does not come from Hermes. And what is Hermes? What is it? Well, it's science. It's pure science. Everything about everything, every single thing about our religion, our original nature religion. You see Christians go on and say, oh, the pagans, they worship the sun, they worship these bodies, Mars and Jupiter and astrology and all this demon stuff. No, they didn't worship any of these things. What they did is they understood the science and the mechanics, the celestial mechanics, which are connected to us. We are connected to these bodies. Everything that happens in our solar system, if Jupiter does something, if it squares Mars, or it opposes Mars or the sun, or any of these aspects that are going on with the planets, you can rest assured that we will feel it. And so they were attuned to this. They knew this. They understood how these things were happening, and that the sun, the core of our solar system, was responsible for our lives, and the energies that we feel during the day, during the year, was sustaining us and giving us life and warmth and love. And so the science is based on all of these things. So when they, for instance, a good example of, I'll just give you another example. I spoke about Jesus. I can go on and on and on and show you all the parallels of the ministry of Jesus and how it corresponds to the Son's ministry, its yearly ministry, as it goes through the 12 signs. You see, when the Son goes through the 12 signs, it changes its character and nature every time. This is why Jesus is called the Lamb of God, because when it's in Aries, it's a lamb. Jesus is called the Rock. When it's in Taurus, Taurus is the rock. Jesus is called the Twin, because when it's in Gemini, the Sun is acting as a twin. In Cancer, it's called the Scarabus, the scarab. In Leo, it's the Lion of the tribe of Judah. In Virgo, it's the Virgin, the bread of life. In Libra, it's the Just One. In Scorpio, it's be wise as serpents and yet innocent as doves. In Sagittarius, it's the one who came to divide. In Capricorn, it's the scapegoat of Israel. In Aquarius, it's the Son of Man. Jesus refers himself to the Son of Man. In Pisces, it's the fisherman of men. So these are all names and titles of the Son, which are all and they're all applicable to the very same biblical Jesus, just like Hercules.
Yes, and tell us a little bit about the early Christians. I understood from one of your presentations that there's a great misunderstanding about why the very, very earliest Gnostic Christians, you might say, were killed by the Roman Empire.
Well, yes, because these were people who, according to Eusebius, the church historian, and if you read the works of Philo, the first century Jewish Platonic scholar, he shows that the Christians were adepts of Serapis in Egypt, Alexandria, and that their origin was of antiquity. See, Christians were from Egypt, very, very, very ancient science/religion. And when they left Egypt and Alexandria, many of these so-called Christians, these Gnostics, they went to the Middle East, and they were the Therapeutai, the Essenes, the Telestai. These were people who founded a mystery school based on the concept of a Messiah and the return of a Messiah. In other words, the return of a higher consciousness which would save mankind and bring mankind back to the golden age and restore the spirituality of mankind. Well, that's what the Gnostics were. And of course there was Marcion, there was Valentinus, there was Basilides. The Apostle Paul was also, the so-called the Apostle Paul was a Gnostic Christian. There were many Gnostics. The literalist Christians, which came up from this in this period, they were exposed as the buffoons who were distorting the scriptures and giving it a literal rendering. And the people who were behind this were the Romans. And in particular, the Flavian dynasty. The Flavians were inventors of fictional religions to enslave mankind. Vespasian, who set himself up as the Son of God, and Titus, who went to Jerusalem and destroyed the mystery schools, they set up a counterfeit Christian religion which was based on a historical Jesus. In order to destroy this messianic movement in the Mediterranean, and in order to snuff out the spiritual light of the Gnostic Christians, and to divert worship and attention to the Caesars of Rome.
I should point out here that a sign of how thoroughly the Roman emperors succeeded, by the 5th century, it was well acknowledged even by some of the emperors in their own writings that the power of the empire depended on 4 legs: a standing army of soldiers, a sitting army of bureaucrats, a kneeling army of priests, and a crawling army of informers.
Oh, my, that's beautiful. Exactly. And Rome has been behind this. Now, Rome has put a lot of money into this fiction to make it stand up, but the fiction's falling. It's a house of cards. There's no lie that will endure forever, and the lie of the historical Jesus Christ, it will fall. It must fall. It's a lie. It is an absolute aberration which has caused so much bloodshed on this earth. Christians, or so-called literalist Christians, have been shedding blood in the name of Christ for thousands of years now, since the Empire of Rome began with its fictional story about a historical saviour. There's only one salvation. There's only one way to be saved if you're looking for salvation. Salvation is waking up. Salvation is waking up to who you are and to your freedom and to who you are, in that you were born free. Whatever paper that you registered with, your marriage certificate and your birth certificate and all these things that Rome owns, they belong to Rome. They belong to Rome. We are free. We are the free. And that's what salvation is. Slavery is joining one of these organizations which invented slavery. That's what slavery is. Freedom is getting the hell out of there and being free. Yeah. And
Santos, will you briefly cover the papal bulls?
Well, yes, the Catholic Church has cursed mankind with so many papal bulls. The most powerful papal bull was written up in 1302 by Pope Boniface VIII, and that papal bull is a Sestui trust, really. It's an express trust. It is called Unum Sanctum, and in that trust, the famous trust bull, papal bull, the Catholic Church has declared that everything in the earth belongs to it. All the souls therein, and all the chattels, all the personal property, and all the real estate. They're land grabbers.
My friend, I have to cut you off right there because our time is over, and
it's too
we're going to have to turn this over to somebody else. But I'll say this. I had known of that statement of Hitchens that he could get along with a deist, and your accomplishment this hour, my friend, is that you have taught me why he can get along with a deist, and you have impressed me thoroughly. We will be back, not tomorrow, of course, but Monday with another edition of Ron Paul Revolution Radio here on American Freedom Radio. We'll see you then.
Thank you, Santos Bonacci. Thank you so much, sir.
Indeed.
Thank you, guys.
No rules, no rules, no taboo topics, no taboo topics, no fear of doom, no fear of doom. We are American Freedom Radio, American Freedom Radio.